Hi, it's Hazel and welcome to my channel, Hazel and Design. I tape my videos ahead of time and schedule them. I just think that's good time management. However, sometimes, like today, I'm not sure what I said or showed in a particular video. So if there is some repetition here, I apologize. Many of these projects are not it's like those home improvement shows where you think, oh yeah, they demoed a kitchen and rebuilt it in an hour-long episode. And that's before commercials. Isn't it a miracle? Well, we know that crafting in the real world does not go like that. So there is the prep, the collection of supplies, the actual starting steps, the drying time, the curing time, and the necessity to keep creating content. So often projects go by the wayside only to get picked up, later that day, a few weeks from then, and so on and so on, and sometimes never to be picked up again. Anyway, that's a long way of saying you may have seen some of this before, but I definitely know you haven't seen it all. So please, forgive me for any repetition. Now, I had done a video on using up Ideals magazine's pages. And that's basically, with the exception of one, that is what all of these will be. Now, I also had a request from a well, I hope she's a subscriber. Lee had asked about more stenciling. So there isn't any stenciling on this one, but you will see that I did, like if your wish is my command kind of philosophy. So this one obviously still needs some work. Put that aside. I don't know. I haven't done anything more to this one, and I probably have nothing to say about it. So let's put that one aside. So, stenciling. I did a video showing what I had done. Now, I don't know in that video if I had done the line work around some of the shapes. Maybe, maybe not. If I didn't show it in that video, it's because it wasn't complete. And I did go in and do that. I see that, yeah, I outlined even those dark ones that you can barely make out. So what else did I do? I had this one as well. I've added some line work to this one, and you may have seen that as well. Okay. I love this one. So far, I have been reluctant to touch it. Because, when you love something, give it wings. And if it returns, it was yours. Isn't that some kitschy line from way back when? Anyway, so this one remains unchanged. That doesn't mean that that's how it will stay. However, this one, I don't think you have seen. Since I added the shading under these roses, under this guy's tail, under his chest, breast, I also added some shading along these lines just to make them stand out a bit more. Some shading up here as well. I had done sort of that, now I was using a marker, but it has that same technique that we used to do as kids, where you'd put a quarter under a piece of paper and then do the sideways action. Like so. Oh, look at that. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So I'm not sure if you can tell, but I had done some purple mark making and shadows sort of around there. I then went over this part here, and now the roses are visible. Same thing on the doilies there, as well as, you know, on this one. And I like this, the fact that that looks like fabric now. So I did want to show you that. Now this one is still incomplete. I was kind of surprised how many of you liked this blob, this mistake here. And again, most of you know that if I'm unsure what to do, I will just give a piece time to percolate. And I, rather than cutting that off, which would have been an option, I will at some point add more of the same, probably on this opposing corner, or opposing side anyway, but I would say towards the bottom. And also, I'm sure we'll find that that isn't enough. So then the test will be, the challenge will be, where else do some heavy black marks need to appear? So I just kind of wanted to give you an update. This does continue to live here in the craft room, kind of just out of the corner of my eye, you know, within a sight line, so that I keep looking at it, keep wondering, okay, what next? Oh, I don't know if I would have told you. Maybe I did. I'm going to repeat this in case I didn't. I also, with a finer marker, had outlined the shapes of the petals. As I was working on this, I also found that I had inadvertently drawn some of these black lines through the flowers, which I did not want. I want them to recede, not overlap. So I used my white Posca pen to cover the black lines. It worked better in some places than in others. I mean, it didn't have to be perfect, but I didn't want that heavy black line to appear. Now, on the roses themselves, I used a combination of my Caran d'Ache, where are they? Crayons. These are water soluble, but I didn't introduce any water, as well as some of these water soluble pencils as well. So, you know, it just helped to add some definition and some depth, because, you know, sometimes ideals images are really, you know, like this, for instance. This is basically just red lines. There is very little depth or shading or focal point or whatever showing. So, you know, that too is another possibility that exists for when I get back to this. So, again, I guess the moral of the story here is that it's okay to take time with things. I mean, I don't have any burning need for this particular piece. Sometimes, of course, that works to our detriment, because then pieces will sit around for years. But I think that, you know, that expression, when the teacher is ready, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, I think when the answer is ready, you know, then the time is right for finishing up the piece. I had also, if you remember, if you saw me doing that, had used the thicker Posca pen when I began outlining. I think I started on this particular flower, and the line was really heavy. Well, I didn't like that, and I regretted that, because I think this lighter, thinner, finer line is better. So I ended up covering some of that with the Posca pen as well. So hopefully you, you know, again, just proves that there are there are always solutions. There are always fixes available to us. So I'm going to set that one aside. Before I show you the last ideals one, I just want to sneak this one in here. Now, we know that I've been hosting Masterboard Madness all of March. Obviously, you're not going to see this video till sometime in April. And so just a couple of things. I started the month with a video. I did an intro video. Then I did March 1st. I did March 31st. I did March 31st video several weeks ago. I don't remember what I said or showed or did. It's like it's like seeing it for the first time. But I knew that somewhere along the way, I did want to introduce the idea of a total lace-covered masterboard. Now, and look at all that stitching that I did. I have done this before, way back when, maybe before you even knew who I was or why you should visit the channel. So this kind of thing exists elsewhere in a playlist somewhere. I wanted to do it again, and this time I did more layers. I did more overlapping. I wasn't trying to skimp or stretch my supply so far. And it is all lace bits. And I think it's really nice. Now, you know, as with all masterboards, there are options. I kind of wish this was lying flatter. There are always options. It could be, it could be cut down and become just a normal journal cover. Of course, the inside would have to be, the usual stuff to finish an inside. When I did the masterboard before, I did sort of a neutral version like this, and I also did a sort of a dusty pink version. And they were nice, and I turned them into cards and tags, and I'm still hoarding some of those pieces because I love them. So I did want to show this idea. I don't know if anyone else will be doing this before, the month is over. It is the 23rd today. So, we've got kind of more than a week yet to go. So I don't know what content is coming. But I did want to show you this. So basically, all I did was use my glue stick. And, of course, I didn't do it all in one fell swoop. First of all, I thought I was going to do some of it on camera. So I left some parts undone. And then, one thing led to another. And before you know it, I was finishing it. And I think that with these heavier applique type pieces that are on the top layer, I think I may have used some tacky glue to hold them down until they could be stitched down. So by all means, I think this is another great idea for a masterboard. And I hope if you have a surplus of lace that you give it a whirl. So, okay, I got that in. Maybe I'll just leave this here for another second. I do want to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed all the creators, all the participants in Masterboard Madness collab. I wish now that I would have, I guess I could go back and look through my comments and sort of create a list for myself, or maybe a list for you, of all of the things, because without exception, and I don't say things I don't mean, without exception, I found something, a hint, a tip, a trick, a new technique in every single video. And it would be good if I would be able to remember those long term and actually incorporate them into some of my own strategies. So I think that would be a good thing to do. And, if and when I do it, I'll share it with you. Of course, what I may have learned from a video is likely not the same thing that you will have learned from a particular video. But that's okay. It's still a sharing process. So, you know, much has been said. I should put some hand lotion on. I can put hand lotion on while we're talking before I have to touch the next part here. The much has been, you know, said or about the prize. Now, at the time I was putting together this collaboration and communicating with people, I didn't know. So I didn't make any statement to that regard. I knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what it would be. And I have to tell you that my whole thing has been what is happening with tariffs. Clearly, it would depend on who wins the prize. If it is a Canadian winner, then obviously I can do something tangible and a heck of a lot better and more generous than if I were to be having to send a prize to the US. So, until we know with some certainty what is going on, I will continue to be elusive. And it's not because I want it to be cagey or trying to be coy or clever or whatever, or dumb. It's just because I didn't know. And I also believe that by now everyone has begun to feel the pain of this whole fiasco. And I doubt that any U.S. winner would be happy paying tariffs on a prize, on a gift. So, you know, obviously, if the person who wins ends up being an American, now it's lip balm time, I will, you know, come up with some other alternative that will still honor the whole concept of watching all those videos and doing all those things, because I know that is, in fact, a commitment. Okay, so the final thing I want to show you today is what I have done to this one. Oh, I always had it with the 50 at the top. So, you saw this masterboard, but you didn't see it after I added this sort of sparkly tool. And again, this was a direct consequence of picking up a started spool of this stuff at the Edmonton Junk Journal group. So it was on the swap table. You know, I and others had made our rounds to the table more than once. It's the end of the night, and you have to, you know, if the stuff you brought didn't get picked up, you have to take it home. So it was pretty clear that, and I've shown this in subsequent videos, and you'll see it. So that purple and these two things were on the table, and Tina had brought them, and I thought, oh, these are my colors. Of course I'll take them rather than making you take them home again. And I am so, now I don't know how well or how visible this is at your end, but I have to say I just love the look of it. Now, to glue it down, and of course there were areas of overlap, those rolls tend to, they're 6 inches wide. So I had to, you know, kind of crisscross and whatever to get good coverage. You can see areas of overlap. I'm pretty sure that I used tacky glue. I kind of like it for that application. And of course, left it to dry. Although this part here is kind of annoying me. Why does this seem like it? Well, too bad that stitch didn't catch it. Maybe I should just use some of this. I've also been using this Tombow mono liquid glue. This is the stuff that has 2 tips. Oh, now My hands are greasy. Oh no, it unscrews. This fine tip, which is the end that I use, and then at this other end is a broad tip, but we don't want that. So I'm just going to put a couple of dots. This might as well try to lie down a little bit better than it is. I don't know if there are other problem areas. I guess if I spot them, I will do something about it. Anyway, then at that same junk journal meeting, and in the same favorite purple, was a ball off what I thought was just thread. I took it home and I put it on my, tongue depressor things. But when I unrolled it, I realized, oh, it's got these little doohickeys, these little loopy things as part of the strand. So that just added another dimension, and it also gave me well, it was good. The upside was that it added something more. It added a little bit of, focal point and so on. But it also made the couching process a little more challenging because I kind of want to make sure that these guys are kind of spaced out. So couching, and I've done it in a contrasting thread. So obviously the feature fiber here is this. Now, normally, I only cut this off because it was getting to be a nuisance to have this whole thing. And I'm nearing the end. I believe I started in this corner. And I've also, where I've had to join threads or end off, I've also tried to be particularly careful, like doubling up on the stitches or whatever as I've hit the outer edge there. So basically, with any kind of couching, all you need is two, threads. I don't know if maybe it's possible to do it with, I don't know. Let's keep it simple. Let's keep it simple, like to what I know. So you've got your feature fabric, or not fabric, but fiber, and the one that you're going to use to couch it to hold it down. Now you can see that in this case, I've used white pearl cotton. And if I'm not mistaken, this is size 8, I believe. It comes in 5 and an 8. The 5 is thicker, if I remembering that correctly. So, because this is on paper, it has not been at all easy, because of course my hand is only as big as my hand is, to get in, to be able to hold this down from the bottom and do what I need to from above. So, and I didn't really want to, bend and crease this. So there have been some unnecessary holes poked in the process, but that's, again, I'm sure it's not visible to you, and at this point, it doesn't matter to me because I couldn't see any other way to do it. So I did, I almost finished this without you, and then I thought, well, maybe I should just show in my own simple way how couching works. So we see that I've got one of these left. This is quite, if we take that away, you can see this is quite a big open. There's a lot of acreage here that isn't covered. So I think I'm just going to keep heading in that direction. Now, again, because if this was cloth, obviously I'd sort of fold it back and I'd be able to figure out where I should be inserting my needle. Not so darn easy when your fingers can't reach all that way. So I've come up from the, obviously my thread is knotted. Whoopsie. And I'm going to just do a very simple stitch, catching that purple thread in between. Now again, selecting your needle is always a bit of a trick. In this case, this has a sharp point on it because, of course, I need it to go through the paper or a couple paper layers. But I also needed the eye to be big enough so that this thicker thread can go through it. And of course, you know, you kind of want to make sure there's a wee bit of tension on that. You don't, or at least I didn't want it to be kind of droopy and slack in between these white threads that are holding it down. So I think I'll just, you know, rather than do a straight line and get like that, I'll introduce a bit of a gentle curve here. And again, sorry if I'm having to struggle a bit with this. It was not an issue near the edge of the page where, of course, my fingers can reach. So again, just going in down over the purple thread. Now you'll also see that my spacing has not been perfect. So here, that's almost probably 3/4 of an inch. Here, it's more like 3/8. So again, your project, your choice. I think that obviously if we were submitting this to a home ec teacher or a county fair, hoping to win a prize, a person would maybe be a little more precise. It doesn't matter in the long run. It's all about aesthetics. It's all about, you know, getting something done. We can all aspire to perfection, but again, it's sort of a fool's errand because perfection is impossible. It's elusive, and it's sort of halfway to crazy town. So, you know, don't go down that path would be my advice. Now, with all of these, I've done a stitch or two in the actual fuzzy part just to make sure that it, you know, is holding where it should be. So maybe I'll just do a wee bit of a curve here. Oh. And again, sometimes you just have to, you know, like I said, I've made holes where I didn't need them, and then sometimes I've needed a hole and it wasn't there, so just adjust accordingly. The other thing, when I had the purple thread still attached to that, well, let's say spool instead of just for simplicity's sake, it is possible also to make a boo-boo and, you know, get tangled up because you are using two threads. So, you know, just periodically pay attention to what you're doing and make sure that you're not creating some problem underneath. Again, if you do and you don't catch it in time, that's not a deal breaker either. So maybe I'll go, how do I want to go? And you're almost, in this case, you're almost making that decision. Well, since I came up there, I guess I better go that way. You're almost making it stitch by stitch. Again, I didn't want to go through the pain of trying to glue down a fiber. Number one, it's not easy. It's not usually very effective either. So why add to the headache? Sometimes we just want to get on with it. We want to get things done. Whoops. Oh, and then of course, pause to re-thread your needle. And of course, like women who stitch everywhere, quite often, the best strategy is to just wet the tip, flatten it out a bit, and carry on. I think that this is, I mean, it's not even done yet. Hopefully I can finish this without it taking too much longer. This one would be a hard one to cut up. So I'm thinking that if I ever decide to use it, more than likely it should, oh dear, it should be a journal cover as opposed to cut it up for tags. Now, I suppose if I did cut it up, and for instance, suppose the cut line was in between these two, a person would either have to sew around whatever it is, the journal card, the pocket, the tag, you know, whatever, and then, or tack that down with a spot of glue, because, you know, otherwise you'd have all those things unraveling, poking up, and potentially causing some problems. Now, I suppose I could go this way and exit out this way. That might be better. Okay, let's do not quite a U-turn, but again, I hope that you can, oh, and it doesn't help that I got a paper cut on a finger. Oh, I'm pretty far away. Let's try to move over a bit. Oh, that's bagging a little there. Yeah, a paper cut right, you know, at the tip of a finger that would be pushing a needle through. You know, probably the tool also adds a wee bit of resistance, but I think that anything like that is definitely worth it for the look that it's provided. So, you know, don't let this grunting and, you know, issue here at the end scare you off trying this. It is really a very simple stitch. It's a beautiful thing. You can imagine you could do all sorts of combos with your fibers. You could have a, you know, like if you were doing this on a slow stitch project and not on paper, for instance, you might choose a much thicker, more decorative, I keep splitting that thread, more decorative fiber. You could also pick a much smaller, and you could pick a matching couching thread, although that might not be as effective. But you could certainly pick a thinner thread, you know, like a couple strands of embroidery floss or whatever. So you'd get a different look based on the, you know, whatever choices you make design-wise. Sometimes if I come to an intersection like this, where fibers are crossing, I just like to kind of put in a stitch that's going to grab them both. Ah! I don't want to bleed on this. Okay, I just need a few more, and then we're out of here, baby. So I hope that you give this stitching a try. It is very simple. I would hate to think how much harder this would have been if I would have picked a blunt needle. Because as I say, I'm going through, you know, glue that has dried, couple layers of paper, minimum of 2 layers of paper, plus the tool as well. Now I could have finished this off camera, but then you wouldn't have seen how it turned out. So that's why I'm persevering here. And you'll notice that I gave myself, when I was trying to figure out, well, how much thread do I need, I gave myself a little extra because it's easier to cut off than to patch something that's too short. Too short. Okay, now as I said before, I'll just do a couple of stitches here. I will, now if this ends up being a journal cover, more than likely, I would be sewing either a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch around the perimeter. You know, it may also involve what am I trying to say? It might also involve, I think I'll just also put a stitch right through the center here. Whoops, not from that end, I won't. You know, it might also involve adding trim, you know, the typical stuff that we sometimes do to journal covers. Okay, now the best way to end things off at the back is to run your needle, you know, under a few adjacent stitches. And, you know, whoops. Oh, you probably can't even make out what's happening here, white on white. So I ran it under those few stitches. I'm going to just do that again. And as this loop is closing, put the needle through it and pull, which will form a knot. And typically I do that again, just for peace of mind. Now, of course, if this does become a journal cover, it will also be, you know, sandwiched between the inside as well. I mean, whatever goes on the inside. So I like how that looks. And again, if it becomes a journal cover, let's see how easily we could bend this. This would require some obedience training. I don't know why it seems so stiff right there. Seems willing to bend elsewhere. Yeah, it's right here that's... So, you know, what I typically do, because of course I have my collection of 500 covers that I need to keep adding to. I think what I'll do is just add a few of these clamps to, again, help coax this into, now I don't want a sharp fold there because, you know, this is now 6 inches. And if I decide, I could leave it this size rather than cutting this down to an 11 inch, you know, like a piece of paper. I want to have the flexibility of, you know, letting this be you know, maybe a 1/2 inch spine if I choose to have more than one signature or whatever. So on the inside, I started to say, let me show you here at this edge. Of course, we would want to cover the bulkiness and the unevenness of all that stitching that's in there. So maybe the best bet there would be batting, and then another fabric or wallpaper or something like that that has a bit of strength to it, or perhaps, you know, a thicker fabric, or what was I going to fix here? Oh, right here. A thicker fabric, or I don't know if cardstock would do the trick, but anyway, I just wanted to show you that. So now you know how to couch. So thank you for joining me. And guys, we will see you in the next one. And maybe you won't have to look at these Ideals masterboards anymore. Anyway, thank you. Bye-bye.